If you are a solo practitioner, you could be missing out on your full potential. Today, let's discuss why joining a magical community might be the game changer that you have been looking for all along. Hello everyone, I am Solomon Pakal. I am a generational brujo of Kachikal Maya descent. I'm a historian, and I am a cult researcher with over 22 years in the game. So, group ritual. Why is it important? I think solitary practice, whether it's paganism, witchcraft, manifesting, various occults, they have all of these solitary paths have been pretty popular for a while now. I would say even stretching back into the late 80s, early 90s. At one point, there was a collapse of ritual groups. Golden Dawn, OTO, a lot of this had dissipated. Various covens dissipated. More folk traditions, if they ever met, it was by word of mouth and very strict invitation to where there was no written invitations. But around the turn of the 90s, I would say solitary practice of any kind of mystical or magical kind became more popular because more books started to get printed out. And every decade after that had its own kind of style or flavor of solitary practice. This is good on a general sense because it would empower the individual. There was a possibility of empowering individual practitioners. And the dawn of printing mystical, magical, occult media and alternative spirituality was great because it allowed for more representation. And more representation is always a good thing. Diversity is always a good thing. Not simply for the sake of diversity, but just for the sake of having so many different approaches to look at. And as alternative spirituality, witchcraft, the occult, New Thought, New Age movement became more accepted, more and more books would get pushed out by both good authors and not so good authors. But it would be all of these efforts that actually incentivized and highlighted the advantages of being a solitary practitioner. The downside to this is that it didn't incentivize groups to get together. I think since 2020, with the lapse of with social distancing implemented it actually encouraged people who were alone to just try and stay alone. Now, I respect a lot of people's solitary practice. I've had many years as essentially a solitary practitioner in certain segments. And being a solitary practitioner, you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls from group activities that could possibly happen. But truth be told, there is no substitute for magical community and group activities in the practice, in spirituality. There's a bias towards spirituality and the occult and mysticism, magic, enchantment, all of that, as somehow being like the exceptions to the rule, or how it's almost completely from reality to the point where it doesn't follow similar, at least principles. Maybe it doesn't follow like the same rules as this, hard 3D reality, right? But there are rules that it's governed by, just like anything else. And just like anything else, magic and practical enchantment, and yes, even mysticism, they're skill sets. After doing this enough, you find, and if you compare notes with other people, i.e. magical communities, that all of this spirit stuff is a skill set, just like anything else. I always hearken it back to martial arts. Now, here's an example. I can go and hit a heavy bag all I want. Will that help me, like in live sparring or in a live fight? It can, but there's definitely a limit. Because while you are getting some good quality repetitions in on a stationary target, you are training yourself completely to fight a stationary target. This is if You do not cross-train with other people. And this could be just pad work, or it could be live sparring. And that is no different than the occult, magic, or mysticism, or manifesting. Alternative religion, period. Getting closer to ethereal forces. There's a reason why people would read books and read holy texts. Those are the testimonies of somebody else. You're trying to get comparative analysis through a holy text. While you can do that as a solitary practitioner, you are still having some kind of dialogue with a printed, evergreen version of the person. So I say that to say that there is no substitute for group ritual, and that group ritual has a lot of payoffs. So let's start with the first one, the big one. Group ritual, as in a ritual with several magicians or several manifestors. You could even say it's like a meditation group or something. At some point it kind of becomes a ritual. Group ritual is a serious amp in energy. I'll caveat this by saying, like, I think the most powerful rituals I've ever done were in isolation. Like, I did them myself for me, and the ones that had the most impact on my life. But let's say there are a lot of cool peripheral things that you would like in life, but for some reason just haven't really manifested them because they might be on the peripherals of your mind, or you haven't given them much importance, or you can't navigate the problem on your own because you are too much in your own head, you're too close to the situation, you're too biased. Similar effects to like why you would get a reading about certain matters over others. And I can tell you, from group ritual, I've been able to manifest some pretty cool things at times in my life where I didn't absolutely desperately need them, but they were very cool to have. Example, I did a group ritual with, there was a very talented magician who is kind of a big figure, and we were part of the same group. And we did a ritual to the Archangel Sachiel, or Zadkiel, the Archangel of Jupiter. And I got $10,000, like definitely within 2 weeks of that happening. And I look back at that ritual and its effectiveness because it was very clear cut to me. There wasn't a lot I was doing at the time. I knew what I was asking for. I was asking very upfront, like, for what I wanted. And I don't think I put on like a piece of paper, I want $10,000 or so, but it was around that ballpark. Like all the verbiage and the feeling was around $10,000. And here's another pro tip. At that point in my life, my ideas of finances were my relationship with money was, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like millionaire kind of relationship with money. Because I had a similar ritual that I did on my own, I think within that same year. And it too manifested $10,000 for me. And $10,000 was kind of a repetitive thing. I think it was because I was much younger and I was used to working kind of minimum wage jobs. So like I was used to having like $10,000 kind of being my base. Like, so that was like the biggest base I've ever like known up until that time. So pro tip, like if you're not manifesting kind of like the money you want, I near guarantee there is something to be said about this kind of Neville Goddard law of attraction. Neville Goddard kind of New Thought, New Age, Bob Proctor kind of talk, where your perception and your relationship with money does influence the like amount, the actual amount, because later on in life I would be able to manifest a lot more a lot more, because my relationship with money was different. My understanding of myself and money was very different. So that's why I say like you should look into some kind of, this is why like theurgy and mysticism, or kind of more like the self-help rap, like that it's not shadow work per se, but getting to know yourself on a more psychological level can help you expand your magical results, because you have a cap, you have a limit, and then from that limit you can learn to expand your limit, and sometimes you can expand the limit pretty quickly. But this is just one example. I've been a part of many group rituals. I've had been a part of formal groups. I've been a part of informal groups where I've done team rituals before. And the results have been like oddly spooky. Sometimes they're not necessarily within the grasp of straight up material gain. But I remember there was another ritual that I had done with two magicians on Halloween years ago, and one of the participants was asking for essentially a better outcome for an environmental disaster that was going on. And literally the next morning, there was the environmental disaster had stopped, and this was one that was going on for weeks. So group rituals can make things happen. I would say on maybe this is just a trend. Maybe I'm just picking up on it because I'm talking about it right now. But group rituals in particular, I think, have can have widespread, easier to have widespread effects. The biggest example is probably the Cone of Power ritual that was done in England during World War II to repel the Blitz, the Battle of Britain, and the invasion, the German invasion of England. It was able to do that. It's a pretty well documented ritual, and it was a group ritual. This is why, for all of the criticism that Wicca gets, that's a pretty big win. That's a pretty big win, and not many magical paths have big wins like that. So when people try to make fun of Wicca, there you go. We can compare winning records. I'm not Wiccan, by the way, but I cross-trained with a bunch of Wiccans over the years, and we're regulars at the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft, which has a Wiccan base, and just mad respect to the people that crawled so that we could run. Anybody that's of alternative religion. Wicca was one of those pioneering groups in the 20th century. But yes, group rituals can manifest really cool results on the individual, but also the collective. Protection and support. This is something that I think runs deeper with much more personal kinds of groups, such as covens that kind of meet up individually and they have a good dynamic where people are protected by each other, and the collective current and the collective maybe egregor or deity that they would call upon. When I was a part of a more official group, I did not feel this per se, but I have felt this much more with my latest group that we have formed here with some high-level people. That there is a general level of protection, and that we do have a loyalty to one another. It's not in some creepy way either of saying all these oaths and cutting our hands and shaking on it or something. It's not like that. We're not like the Losers Club. But there's a general sense of camaraderie and trust and respect for each other's expertise that we would just be down for each other kind of thing. So if you can find that kind of dynamic, I found that it's more common in actual covens rather than orders, but or any kind of order that's not super bureaucratic and big. But that's an advantage worth having, because I tell you right now, I mentioned before when I was growing up, witch wars were really commonplace, and they weren't done over the internet. They were done in neighborhoods and stuff. And it would really pay off to have some protection and support. And sometimes you would be able to recruit some protection and support. But it was really more like the kind of the Wild West in that regard. The third big benefit I'd like to point out for group ritual is cross-training and comparative analysis. And I've mentioned this before, but all of the M words, manifestation, magic, mysticism, are very similar to another M word, martial arts. And you can even see this through the history, right? Qigong, Tai Chi, all of these, even positions from yoga are derived from, or it's debated, like, did yoga come first or did Kalari Payatu come first? They really grew up alongside each other, so, like, the debate's kind of frivolous. There has always been a relationship between the mystic and the martial because it has to do with various types of energies, and from those energies grow even, like, bigger concepts. Why this is important, and especially why this is important going into the future, is because we can only have a more peaceful world if we have more discussion and participation between groups of people that are different. Religious conflict is supported by one truisms. One true that, one true path, one true son of God, one true ways to live by. Cross-training and comparative analysis helps us to see our similarities, which we have a lot more than we do differences across all esoteric paths. Even mainstream religion, you actually look at the minutiae of what those religions are built upon. They're very similar principles to what mysticism, what the M words are built upon. And this was the same thing even with, like, martial arts when they started to mix them all, was while there were some very key differences, there was actually a lot more similarities. I'll give you an example. So, like, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, they consider grappling, and they would consider, like Muay Thai and karate striking, right? But karate actually has some tosses in there, like actually, like, tossing bodies. That's grappling. That's like wrestling and judo. And then Muay Thai has entire clinch systems, which that is grappling. And then with jiu-jitsu, they say there's no striking in jiu-jitsu, but when you're shifting positions, you're trying to get away with cheeky, like, knees and elbows to the body, or, like, just like you can't strike to the face, but you can rake across the face and you can push and stuff. And it's like it's almost like you're striking. So there's a lot more similarities in the minutia, but you don't get this on the exoteric explanations of these paths. You get them when you cross-train, and now you're seeing the esoteric layer of these paths. So cross-training and comparing help us to see each other's similarities, but also celebrate each other's differences. Because in my group, right, we recently did a Mayan ritual with the god Chak. And there's one very talented magician in particular who wrote a beautiful poem to Chak, and not only was it a beautiful poem, they researched Chak even after we had announced the ritual. I threw some resources there. I could understand if people didn't have the time to research it. It was my job to run the ritual, but they really researched it, and they poured their heart into this poem that became like it was an incantation for the ritual. And it touched my heart so much. And this person has a magical background that on a dogmatic interpretation of that background and that path would say that this is all evil because it's not of, the known paradigm, the status quo of where it comes from. So cross-training eliminates spiritual xenophobia, essentially. And the other thing is comparative analysis. What I mean by that is we get to find out what works and what doesn't. And I don't want to even sound too black or white about my choice of words there, what works and what doesn't, because really everything kind of works in on a spectrum, on a point of return on investments, and sometimes you reach a point of diminishing returns. But comparative analysis in the occult, right, and esotericism, how do we know if something works? Well, are there just repeating patterns? Just like with any other science, pattern recognition is really that's the gold. Pattern recognition is how you draw, the best conclusions we can, even throughout history. As a historian, right, we have to look to patterns. We don't know a lot of history. And just like science too, like we don't know a lot of stuff, but we have enough patterns through enough experiments that suggest what is going to happen or what did happen. And then from that point, we can kind of project the future. We can kind of project the past because we've traced enough of the patterns to go either backwards or forwards, left, right, center, from that point within its given context. So comparative analysis has shown that the same kind of patterns that was happening in magic here in the New World in North and South America prior, for thousands of years prior to the arrival of Europeans, there were very similar patterns going on here that were going on in what would eventually become Western esotericism. And in the Far East, and it's like there's some correspondence differences, but the patterns are largely the same. That is very important because that shows our similarities. And if it's showing similarities in this like weird esoteric science, that's a very soft science compared to hard sciences. That is as close to objective truth that we're going to get for right now. And in a science, or like in an art that is, starved of objectivity, these pattern recognitions are providing us the best source of evidence for its existence and legitimacy and its practicality. Now, I would like to bring up some problems, obviously, or some points of concern when it comes to group ritual, because I have experienced them as well, and this is I've had like some big problems too with groups or gatherings. There's been a fair amount of just getting involved with scumbags, like people that are into alternative religion or manifesting, or not so much manifesting, kind of, but it's more so with actual occult people, right? And more magical people and mystical people, or people of that vein. There's a lot of scumbags, just straight up, and even if they're kind of talented or knowledgeable, they might have ulterior motives. And some of these people make their way into groups. And I myself have had problems to the point of almost physical altercation, because this was regarding it wasn't just regarding disagreements, it was regarding physical safety. So this is something to be concerned about. It is, because while I'm an advocate for magical community, I would say a good 50, maybe more, it's a 50. I think my track record, honestly, with group rituals has been 50-50. Where I've had good group dynamics, and then I've had some, maybe they start off good, and then there were some really nasty things beneath the surface. So, but I say that with the caveat of we should always constantly be striving, especially in the 2020s going forward, we should be striving to build magical communities, build strong, ethical, magical communities, because the art needs that. The art of magic and mysticism and manifestation, it needs community, it needs teamwork. So be selective with people, unless it's happening at some kind of establishment, right? Some kind of public esoteric establishment that's hosting a very public event and is has a lot of eyes on it and is being detailed. Unless it's that, be very selective. Be very clear and understanding. I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but for my group, I quite literally wrote a military-styled standard operating procedure, because I wanted everything to be crystal clear about what was being expected and what was expected for people to do and not do, and respecting everybody's limits and everybody's preferences. I wrote that with the intentions of being good to my people. So leadership is a big part of group ritual. Finding good leaders, being good leaders. That being said, there should be kind of a, I think going forward in the magical communities, we should have people that prioritize, I myself, I have my order that is very close to the chest, very inner circle. And then I do local events where we include a lot of different people, and I invite everybody to those. And it's not to be gatekeepy or whatever. It's simply it's also operational efficiency, but it's a safety reason. It's a maturity reason. It's an energetic reason too. Some people just don't have the energy. And then it's also like an expertise thing. It's an operational. Meaning like my order is made up of highly professional and highly capable advanced practitioners. And that kind of energy, if you want it to be like a group thing, you can't have just anybody in there. You have to have people that can keep up and contribute to the collective effort. But all of these are reasons why, especially going forward into the future, into this coming age, that group ritual is the future, because it is what's going to solidify all of the arts, magic, mysticism, manifestation, into being more powerful and legitimate on a societal level.